It's my great honor to have the opportunity to introduce truly a man who doesn't need an introduction. I mean, he's got his own TV show. He's got lots of books, 50 books, many books. He doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to give you a little introduction anyways. Why is he here? First of all, he's here because of the generosity of a very important partner of ours, International Partners in Mission. And Mr. Joe Sistone, who's here, the executive director. Good timing, Joe, coming in. He's made it possible for Rick to come to town because International Partners in Mission is celebrating their 40th anniversary. And this is a great celebration week for them. And when we learned that Rick was in town, we had a conversation with Joe, and they were very generous to make his appearance here possible, and for Rick to agree to another opportunity to speak and to tell about his work, and I'm grateful for that. But why a travel writer at a school of social work? At the heart of our mission is a commitment to social justice and empowerment of people in their communities. And we define those communities both locally, nationally, and internationally. We strive to give our students experience working in the communities, both locally and internationally, so that their eyes are opened. Last summer, a year ago in 2013, my wife Linda and I had the opportunity to join a tour to Scotland. And lo and behold, who was on the tour but Mr. Rick Steves, just as a participant. Well, we got to know him. We found that nice, pleasant person whom you've gotten to know on this TV show actually is a nice, pleasant person. Although you're taller than I expected. And I learned that he's more than a travel writer. I found that he has a commitment to social justice. And I learned that through the journey that he's been on through his career and the development of his business, he has taken on the mission of opening the world for people and opening their eyes so that we realize that we're citizens of the world. And we realize that as citizens of the world, we have much more responsibility than what we're doing locally. We have responsibilities for everyone. And so when we had the opportunity for Rick to come here, I thought it was a wonderful opportunity for him to share his experiences. Some of you have perhaps seen some of the presentations he's done recently on his trip to Iran, his trip to Israel and Palestine. And those are challenging topics. And they're topics that can get some people upset, but they're important because it introduces us to the people there. And we get to see them not as people waving flags and so forth, but really as people. And I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for that now. So without further ado, Mr. Rick Steves.
Well, it's a delight to be here and to be able to share with you my thoughts on how travel broadens our perspective. And I'm going to keep this pretty snappy because I understand we'll have a Q&A afterwards, right? And I'll be reading some of the questions and giving you some answers to those too. And I've spent a third of my adult life living out of a 9 by 22 by 14-inch carry-on the airplane-sized suitcase, hanging out with people who see things a little differently than us, people who find different truths to be self-evident and God-given. And I find it really stimulating and sometimes challenging and very constructive. And I've learned over 30 years of traveling, 4 months a year for 30 years, that the most important souvenir we can have is to take home a broader perspective. And then my belief is that we can, when we come home, we're probably more thankful than ever that we're Americans, but at the same time, we are, I think, better citizens of the planet, and that we can take that global perspective that we learned through our travels and employ it here in our country, and that makes travel a political act, and I think that's a good thing in a number of ways. And that's sort of the theme of my talk and my books and so on. And Europe is my beat, and when I think about Europe, it's just, when you travel, you get more excited about nature. We have some wonderful nature here in the United States. The nice thing about Europe's nature is it's so accessible. These people look rugged, but they didn't break a sweat to get up here. They rode the lift up, had breakfast in a revolving restaurant, and now they're walking for 3 hours on a ridge. Tight roping on a ridge. Can you imagine that? I mean, the most incredible alpine panorama over here, the Eigermonk and Jungfrau lakes stretching to Germany on the other side, and ahead of you, you hear the long legato tones of an Alphorn announcing that the helicopter-stocked mountain hut is open, it's just around the corner, and the coffee schnapps is on. That is a beautiful moment, you see? And you come home more enthusiastic about nature. You also come home with more of an understanding that there are slices of culture, edible and otherwise, that a lot of people are excited about that we don't even know about, or that we didn't know you can get excited. When we were in Scotland, we learned about whiskey, and people really love their whiskey up there. And I'm kind of a cultural chameleon. I never drink whiskey unless I'm in Scotland, and I never drink tea unless I'm in Britain. And then a little spot of tea after a long day of sightseeing feels right, you know. But if I'm in Czech Republic, it's a nice lager. If I'm in Belgium, it would be more of a dark beer, one of those monastic beers. And when I'm in France, I'm really into cheese courses. You know, now I grew up thinking cheese is no big deal. It's orange in the shape of the bread. Here you go, cheese sandwich. And then you go over to France, and these people are evangelical about their cheese. I mean, you step into a cheese shop, and it's a festival of mold. And they are so excited, they want to introduce you to it. And the cheesemonger grabs me and says, "Come over here, smell this." Oh, it smells like the feet of angels. And I just smell it, and I go, well, it smells like the feet of baseball players to me, but whatever. Now, I know a lot of Americans, because for 25 years I've led Americans around Europe on these tours. A lot of us are sort of threatened by somebody who's excited about something that we don't get. It's not they're better than us. It's not they're more sophisticated than us. It's just they really are excited about this little slice of culture that is a forte for them. You don't need to embrace it when you get home, but it is instructive and worthwhile to know that there are certain people that will pay a lot of money for a little bit of stinky cheese. When you travel, you get out of your comfort zone, and people stare at you. And I love that. You know, in our world here, we kind of hang out with people we're comfortable with, and that's just human nature, I think. It's certainly my life up in Edmonds, north of Seattle. But I like traveling in an area where I'm the oddity. And it's just stimulating, and it reminds me that we're 4% of this planet, but there's 96% out there, and it's a good idea to get to know them. They don't need to be earth-shaking experiences. This was a goofy little encounter I had in Italy. This kid was just staring at me. It's kind of rude. Finally, his dad said, "Excuse my son, he stares at Americans." And I asked him, "Well, what's with that?" He said, "Last week we were at McDonald's having our hamburger, and my son, noticing the fluffy white bun, said, 'Dad, why do Americans have such soft bread?' And the dad said, 'Son, it's because Americans have no teeth.'" So the kid was confused, and he looks at tourists now to see if they have teeth, and I showed him mine to overcome that little bit of misunderstanding between peoples. But there are silly misunderstandings between people. For years I went to Bulgaria during the Cold War, and I hung out. I had friends there that were just confused about capitalism because of their system and how they would frame things and everything. And we'd sit down, and they'd earnestly ask me things like, "Okay, in your country, if everything is private property, how can you go anywhere without trespassing?" I never thought about that, but from somebody who was raised in a communist system, they would think that. And we have misunderstandings about them, and they've got misunderstandings about us. And when we connect, it's always constructive. And it makes it harder for their propaganda to demonize us because they've met us. And it makes it harder for our propaganda to demonize them because we've met them. It's just a good thing all around. One of my favorite places to travel is Ireland. In part because I think in Ireland I have this sensation that I'm understanding a foreign language. I just love traveling in Ireland and talking to the people. The people have this incredible gift of gab, an art of conversation. The best place for Irish conversation is the west coast of Ireland, where they're Gaeltachts, where people speak Gaelic first and English second. They stand on the bluff and they gaze out at the Atlantic and they say, the next parish over is Boston. And you get into these amazing conversations, and I don't care what castle you're going to, this is what it's all about, talking to the people. And I was talking to these guys, and after a while I asked the guy on the left, I said, "Were you born here?" He thought about it, and he said, "No, it was about 5 miles down the road." Later on I asked him, "Have you lived here all your life?" He said, "Not yet." Good. So just meeting people is just, it carbonates the whole experience. Now, my beat is Europe, and for me, Europe is the wading pool for world exploration, and I love traveling beyond Europe, but my work is helping Americans grow beyond Orlando. You know, after 5 or 6 trips, try something a little more challenging. All right? I know a lot of Americans don't have much of an appetite for reality, and Orlando is perfect in that regard, but you know, there's a real world out there, and you've got a chance to go to Portugal instead. It doesn't cost any more. People are friendly, and you'll do fine speaking English, and you'll actually learn something. It's an opportunity, you see. And so I just love helping people go to Europe. Europe is, you know, the big news in Europe is the unification of Europe, the EU. Since World War II, they've worked very hard to unite. Now, the main driving force here, I think, is so they don't have another world war. I mean, imagine in 1947, visionaries sitting in the rubble of a bombed-out continent realizing we got to do something radical here, or our children are going to be digging out again, just like we have twice in our lifetime. They've got to do something, and what they needed to do was weave the economies of Germany and France together so a war would be inconceivable. Now, a lot of Americans are eager to put down Europe for all sorts of, you know, political reasons, and these naive socialists, they've got so many regulations, and they care about the environment and all sorts of stuff. But really, the bottom line is Europe is a success because I don't think a big war over there is conceivable anymore. Germany and France are interwoven, and that makes Europe a triumph. Now, of course, Europe was also uniting to create a free trade zone to compete more efficiently with this free trade zone here, the United States of America. To put things in perspective, the united European economy is 400 million people, producing about $15 trillion of stuff a year. To compete with our economy, which is 300 million people, producing the same $15 trillion of stuff a year. Now, a lot of Americans are challenged by Europe's social sensibilities, and we're quick to put them down economically because they're so idealistic and naive that their economy just doesn't work as well as ours. And they will say that, look at Americans, it only takes 300 million of us to make 15 trillion, and it takes 400 million of Europeans to make that much. Well, an honest, more complete analysis is, yes, we make more per person, but Europeans choose to work 20% fewer hours, and they willingly make 20% less stuff so they can have more time with their families. Now, it's not right or wrong. It's just a societal choice. In America, we eagerly have the shortest vacations in the rich world, and we don't even take them all. We work ourselves into an early grave, whereas Europeans are just more into working hard and playing hard. I mean, I was in Amsterdam a while ago, and I was doing my research for my guidebook, and I saw 8 grown men in a little boat having a party on Wednesday afternoon, and I thought, maybe there's a festival I don't know about. I should ask them what's going on. Hi guys, what you doing? And they say, it's Wednesday. Every Wednesday we cut out our work early and we get together with our friends and we get on a boat and have some fun. Do you want to join us? It's just so annoying the way they play. It really offends Americans because we have our work ethic. But what's it all about? What is our work ethic? We're already so wealthy as a society. You know, I mean, it's an interesting thing. Now, I'm so thankful I run my business here in the United States. I employ 100 people. I employ them really well. We make a lot of stuff. It's a great value, and I make a lot of money. And I would be frustrated to be an entrepreneur in Europe because it's just a cumbersome way to do your guerrilla capitalist kind of work. But we can learn from Europe too. So it's just fun to be able to compare societies, and it's certainly not one right and one wrong. The big news in Europe is the movement to the east. A few years ago, after the Cold War, the entire Warsaw Pact basically joined Europe. Overnight, you got 100 million new capitalists. What an exciting time. And you go over to Eastern Europe, and it's a festival of pent-up entrepreneurial spirit. I remember from lots of travel in the Cold War. I remember back when, this is a picture in Poland, but I remember when Poland was so bleak and grim, demoralized, because they had this clueless command economy, ignoring the basic laws of supply and demand. People were taking their windshield wipers in with them at night. Why? Because with a command economy, somebody upstairs forgot to order windshield wipers. Demand exceeds supply. Thieves get wind of that. They steal your windshield wipers at night and sell them on the black market in the morning for a small fortune. That's how the black market works and why. Of course, today the laws of supply and demand are kicking in. More than enough windshield wipers are produced and distributed to meet the demand, and people in Warsaw are leaving their windshield wipers on their car all night long. It's a great time in Eastern Europe right now. They're enjoying their freedom, and they've got their windshield wipers on their cars. One of the fun things about Europe for me is the diversity. There's such incredible diversity. You drive 4 hours and it's a different language group, a different cuisine, and the whole works. And you'd think as Europe is uniting, there's 300 million people with the same coins in their pocket now. They don't need to show their passport when they cross borders and so on. You'd think it'd become one big homogenous strip mall. But the fun thing is, as Europe unites, it's counterintuitive, but the cultural and ethnic diversity becomes more vivid. Here's my theory. In Europe, there's three sort of loyalties: the region, the nation, and Europe. If you ask somebody in Munich, where are you from? They might say, I'm German, or they might say, I'm Bavarian for the region. They might say, I'm German, or they might say, I'm European. If you got a friend in Barcelona, where are you from? They might say, Catalonia, or Spain, or Europe. If you look at any city hall in Europe now, you will see three flags. One for the region, in this case, Scotland, one for the country, Britain, and one for Europe. It's in our lifetime, most of the headlines have been filled with regions challenging nations, Ireland and Scotland threatening London, Basque people upsetting Madrid, Celtic people in the west of France threatening Paris. As Brussels becomes more powerful for Europe, nations can read the writing on the wall. They're going to be less impactful, and they're giving their regions more freedom to wave their flag and teach their children their own languages. Interestingly enough, the little languages are more widely spoken today than they were a generation ago. Hard to imagine, but that's one of the results of unification of Europe. Scotland was given the vote a month ago by Britain. It's kind of a symptom of this. A few years ago, Britain let Scotland have its own parliament in Edinburgh for the first time since 1707. This is big news. If you go to an ATM machine in Barcelona, you'll find 8 buttons for languages. 4 of them are Spanish languages. Spain has 4 different languages. You've got Catalan for the people of Catalonia, Espanol for most Spanish, Gallego for the people of northwestern Spain, Basque for Basque people, and then 1 button for the Germans, French, English, and another button for everybody else. Now, if you were to go to Basque country, you'd have the same 4 buttons on the top, but Basque would be first, and Catalan would be up there, not because Catalonians traveling in Basque country couldn't use English or Spanish, but out of solidarity for their fellow nations without a state. You see, there are so many little underdogs in Europe, and now they're feeling their oats in Catalan. People are teaching their children to speak Catalan first. They speak Catalan at school and at home. They learn Spanish as a second language. That would land you in jail a generation ago, but today it's okay. When you think about Europe, it's a big free trade zone that has a all for one and one for all philosophy, just like when our country built our interstate system back in the 50s. When we built our highways, poor states didn't get poor roads. We all got quality roads because we're all in this together. Same thing in Europe. In Europe, there's some countries are net givers. They give more than they get out. Other countries are net receivers. They get out more than they put in, according to what is the medium. I remember traveling in Europe in the old days. The 4 poorest countries, Greece, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland, had absolutely no freeways. Today they are laced with German-style freeways. And when you see a freeway like this one here in Ireland, a new one, it comes with a sign that says, a European flag that says, this project has received 85% financial assistance from the European Union. In other words, Germany and France paid for this road. Now you Irish people really should use it. Because we got business to do. We're keeping up with the United States. All my life, when I go to Greece, I've crossed the Gulf of Corinth in a funky Greek ferry. A couple years ago, I came to Greece and I had a double take because where the ferry used to be is now a brand new shiny bridge. When I looked at this bridge, my first thought was, this is not a Greek bridge. This is a German bridge, built in Greece so German trucks can get their gummy bears efficiently down into the Peloponnesian Peninsula to make some money. You see, that's the European system. I asked my German friends, don't you get tired of bailing out these corrupt and lazy Greeks time and time again? They say, well, it's kind of a drag, but we've made a lot of money off of them in the past, and we'll make a lot of money off of them in the future, and we just got to keep them on board, you see. So there's this sort of a sense of investing in itself in Europe. Their infrastructure is breathtaking. This is the Hauptbahnhof, the big train station in Berlin. 1,000 trains a day come and go at different levels at right angles. It's just an amazing thing to use the trains in Europe these days. I was just recently in a train station in Munich taking pictures of what were cute little birds squished under the windshield of those trains. I know, it's tragic. And first thing I thought when I saw that little bird was, man, this is a dangerous continent if you're a slow bird. And then I thought, this is a surreal image. I don't know about Cleveland, but where I live in Seattle, you'd wait all your life to see a bird squished under the windshield of a train. I could imagine one sitting on a folding chair on the rooftop with a cigar and a drink maybe, but not squished to the windshield. In Europe, that's commonplace these days. Now, until well into my adulthood, I really believed the world is a pyramid with the United States on top and everybody else trying to figure it out. Our 4th of July was the 4th of July. Nathan Hale, Patrick Henry, Ethan Allen were the ultimate patriots. And then I traveled and I really found out that, no, these are American things, but that's just 4% of the planet. Nathan Hale was great, but there are other Nathan Hales, just as great. That doesn't put ours down. It's just honesty to recognize that there are Nelson Mandelas and Archbishop Oscar Romeros all over this planet, waging courageous struggles for beautiful societies, sometimes winning and sometimes losing. The world is a pyramid, or is not a pyramid, that's everybody else trying to be the same. In fact, we've got the American dream, which is my dream, and I think it makes a lot of sense for Americans, but I've learned that, these people have the Sri Lankan dream, and it's not the American dream. Norwegians have the Norwegian dream, Bulgarians have the Bulgarian dream, and that is something to celebrate. There are struggles going on this planet that are just breathtaking and inspirational. And when I travel, I get to just be aware of them. One of my favorite places to travel as a tour guide is Eastern Turkey, Turkey in general, but specifically Eastern Turkey. I think in part because in Eastern Turkey, there's not a lot of famous sites. You're just out on a cultural scavenger hunt. You got 25 people on your bus. They want to have an interesting time. I'm on the bus with my Turkish co-guide. We're out way in the east in the shadow of Mount Ararat, tooling around looking for something. Find a high school stadium filled with kids having a rally. Stop the bus, go in, see what's happening. 200 kids thrusting their fist up in the sky, singing in unison, "We are a secular nation. We are a secular nation." I asked my guide, "What's going on here? Don't you Turks like God?" "Oh no, we love God, but considering the rising tide of Islamic fundamentalism just over the border to the east, we are very concerned about the fragile and precious separation of mosque and state here in our modern pluralistic secular society given to us by Ataturk with our constitution back in the 1920s. Wow, separation of mosque and state with a country of 70 million people, 95% of which are devout Muslims. Wow, interesting. I never considered that. Just as we're struggling with separation of church and state, they're struggling with separation of mosque and state, and they're not living in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Later on, I was tooling around with our group, came into a village that I think had never seen an American before, stopped, toured the place, wandered around, met the wood carver, very popular big shot in the town. Every little village wanted a prayer niche carved by this man. We gathered around his desk, or his bench in the wood shop, and he was showing off, doing his thing. Suddenly he stopped. He raised his chisel high into the sky, and he declared, "A man and his chisel, the greatest factory on earth." I thought, whoa, this guy doesn't need me to encourage him to go to night school and become computer literate, He is fulfilled. He's contributing. He's proud. That's a beautiful thing. Later on, I asked him, "Can I buy a piece of your carving?" And he said, "No, for a man my age to know that my work will go back to the United States of America and be appreciated, that's payment enough. Take this as a gift from me, and when you look at it back in your home, remember our village." And I always remember his village. That is so touching to me. It humanizes that little town. How many Americans that are so quick to jump onto one bandwagon or other have been able to humanize the people at the end of our policies? We need to humanize the people at the end of our policies, and then we've got to do the right policy. But it is critical that we recognize what that's all about. If you're curious about this kind of teaching, I've got all sorts of information about this and related lectures and all sorts of practical stuff on our website at ricksteves.com and on Facebook. I take people with me all the time traveling and so on. So it's very easy to find out more about what we're doing. For instance, I did a 1-hour TV show on Iran, along with 100 other shows on public television. You can watch any of them at any time just by going to ricksteves.com, go into the TV, click Iran, click Norway, click Spain, and you can watch the shows. I've got 7 years of radio archives all there, so you can listen to all of my different amazing guests that we've had over the years talk about their society and how they deal with their challenges. We Americans are very excited about our liberty. There are places that think they have every bit as much liberty as we do, sometimes even more. Here's two arms full of liberty in the hometown of Salvador Dali in Spain. And all over Europe, where I travel a lot, I'm impressed by the passion people have for their values and their way of life. I love it when a culture is designed so that the traditions are passed from one generation down to the next. I don't know the ethnicity around here very well, but over in Seattle where I live, there's a lot of Norwegians, and my grandma was typical in trying to teach me how to make krumkake, this little pastry, so that I'd be able to teach my kids, and we'd have that little bit of our Norwegian heritage alive and well. In Italy here, there's a town that every summer has a festival where the older kids teach the younger kids how to make a good ravioli. I just love that, when they've worked in their pride of their culture. In a little town here in France, in Burgundy, the Chamber of Commerce has scraped together the resources to make these beautiful orbs, so visitors can appreciate the fine difference in the bouquet of the different wine they produce in that part of Burgundy. In that town, a nose is a life skill worth investing in. And in Europe, I find people eagerly pay too much for their loaf of bread in order to buy it from the person who baked it. Makes no sense economically. I mean, if you live in a world that is all just economic practicality, then you just go out to that big box store and get a cheap price, you know? But in Europe, things trump economic practicality, and it's, to them, family values, and I find that challenging and actually inspirational. Europeans know how to make their fine wine and appreciate their fine wine, and they also know where to fill it up really cheap. This is a filling station for table wine in a little town in Italy, and people, a couple times a year, they'll drive up with a car full of empty jugs and fill the tanks. It's the cheapest liquid you can buy. As I study the different societies, you know, for 30 years I've been spending 4 months a year in Europe, and it's fascinating. I see Europe and America as sister sort of societies. We're both wealthy, affluent, democratic, pluralistic, capitalistic, Christian, and so on. And there are some fundamental differences. One of them is our almost eagerness, it seems like, to legislate morality. Whereas in Europe, they have a denser population and it's complicated, and they've learned that a society has to make a choice. They tell me, tolerate alternative lifestyles or build more prisons. And then they always remind me with this annoying little fact that you Americans lock up 10 times as many people per capita as we Europeans do. Either you are inherently more criminal or there's something screwy about your laws. Just say no. Incarcerate. I don't think we're inherently more criminal. I certainly don't think that. So there's all sorts of different issues that are challenging. I mean, prostitution's a horrible thing, and of course there's a horrible trade in prostitution and basically slave trade. But Europe looks at it in what they call pragmatic harm reduction rather than moralize and incarcerate. You'll see a lot of brothels and red light districts in Europe. Nobody I know has ever thought prostitution's a good thing. But in Europe, rather than lock people up for it, they try to keep it safe and they try to deal with it in a harm reduction kind of way. The prostitute will be, ideally, an independent business person who is checked twice a year by a doctor so they can't be passing HIV and diseases in order to have their license renewed. And if she has a dangerous customer, she pushes her emergency button and she's rescued not by a pimp, but by a policeman. Doesn't work out that nice all the time, but that's the ideal, and they're thinking out of the box to try to minimize the harm caused to their society by prostitution. When you go, drug abuse is a serious problem on both sides of the Atlantic, and we're all dealing with it, and we're trying to deal with it smartly. Europe, I find, is much more think out of the box, creative, and pragmatic. For instance, if you're in a nice restaurant in a poor town or in a poor part of town, and you need to go to the toilet, you step into the toilet, it's very often you're blindsided by blue lights. And when I hit those blue lights, I think, what's going on? And then I remember, blue lights, I cannot see my veins. I couldn't shoot up if I want to. Very frustrating if you're a junkie. Now, you know, a nice restaurant has a toilet, it's easy access from the public, and junkies, when they need to shoot up, they want to get out of the weather, have a quiet place, lock the door, turn on the light, and do their work. Well, the restaurateur doesn't want that in his bathroom because it makes his clients uncomfortable. Across the street, this is in Zurich in Switzerland, would be a machine bolted to the bridge railing that used to sell cigarettes, and now it sells government-subsidized needles. They're almost free. A lot of Americans say, you can't provide needles to these junkies, it's endorsing their criminal activity. Europeans would say, they're addicted to drugs. They're going to be doing it one way or another. Let's at least give them needles so they're not shivering needles and passing HIV. Two different approaches to that. In Europe, in many countries, the word for addicted is enslaved. Europe sees drug addicts not as criminals, but as sick people. They don't need cops and lawyers and judges. They need counselors and nurses, people to help them get their lives back on track. They don't have any more drug problems than we are, any less. You know, rich societies generally have 1% of their people struggling with hard drug problems. Before the war on drugs, we had 1%. Now, 30 years and $1.5 trillion of money spent, we still have 1% dealing with hard drug problems. Europe has 100%. For years, I would take my groups around Europe, and they would see all of these junkies on the streets, and they'd think, oh, these liberal Europeans, look how many drug addicts they have. They have the same as ours. They just have more people that are on the streets because they're still alive and they're not in prison. We lose double the people to drug overdoses that Europe does per capita. On a typical year, the United States loses 18,000 people to heroin overdoses, and Europe loses 8,000. Down the street from this syringe machine would be what they call a cafe fix. A cafe fix is a ugly place filled with wasted people trying to get their lives back on track. Again, they're sick people, and they're treated, and they're working on it in a European way, which is what we call pragmatic harm reduction. Marijuana is another interesting case. It's a case that I'm personally involved in, and I've been for 10 or 15 years speaking out about drug policy reform. I'm a board member of NORML. And none of my friends in drug policy reform are pro-pot. We're anti-prohibition, pro-civil liberties, pragmatic harm reduction, public safety, take the money away from a booming black market and make it a legitimate business and tax the heck out of it and earmark that money for drug treatment programs and health programs and so on. That's what we did in Washington State 2 years ago. I was a co-sponsor of that bill. The people who co-sponsored the legalize, tax, and regulate marijuana bill in Washington State were our Seattle City prosecuting attorney, Pete Holmes, the Republican-appointed federal prosecutor, John McKay, presidents of Bar Association, people who had dedicated their lives to children's issues and public health. It's just common sense to take the crime out of the equation. Now, a lot of Americans think, yeah, but if you legalize it, everybody's going to be smoking it. There's not a reservoir of good people who would love to ruin their lives smoking pot if only it was legal. I got news for you. People who want to smoke pot do. Marijuana rivaled apples as the biggest cash crop in our state, and it's probably about the same around here. So it's not a utopian drug-free society as an option. It is the reality today, or take the crime out of it and take the money away from organized crime and gangs and let the police refocus on serious issues. That's a whole lecture I could talk about, but in Europe it's been 25 years since they've arrested a pot smoker in most countries. In much of Europe, a joint is about as exciting as a can of beer. And the reality is there is no correlation between how many people consume the drug and how strict the laws are. That's fundamental. Every track record. In Europe, the Dutch, who have the loosest laws on marijuana, smoke less than the European average. And Europe, by every government's estimates, ours and theirs smokes less per capita than the United States, where you can do hard time for it. So it's a very interesting subject, and it's something you're going to be hearing about a lot in the future. And I want to stress, it's not driven by pro-pot people. It's driven by the reality that we arrest 800,000 people a year in our society, even today, for nonviolent marijuana possession. 80,000 people are in jail today for nonviolent marijuana possession. They're not rich white guys. They're poor people and they're black people. It's a very clever way for a society to disenfranchise black men, if you want to read more about that. And it's a courageous thing that people are doing today to take down the prohibition of our age, just like smart, caring people took down the prohibition against alcohol back in the 1930s when they realized that prohibition, the law itself, was causing more heartache to the society than the drug abuse it was trying to deal with. When you look at Europe and the United States, you see two different societies that are like sister societies. We're both, so similar. I think we're both passionate about government by, for, and of the people. And I think the difference is, this is just my little theory, in the United States, we're all excited about government by, for, and of the people via the corporations that we own. Not a judgmental statement, it's just in the United States, our idea is the government should keep us safe and create a good business environment so our corporations can prosper, and then we'll all prosper with them. In Europe, it's government by, for, and of the people in spite of the corporations that they own. It's the government that sticks up for things that don't show up on the quarterly profit statement accounting, that's not accounted for honestly. The future, the environment, poor people, that sustainability, that kind of stuff. In Europe, you'd be more likely to see a law that requires you to pay for the disposal of your car when you buy it. Because somebody's going to have to pay for it someday, and it's not going to happen if we don't cover that right now. Now, in the United States, that would be considered not good for business, and it would never pass, you see. So, again, it's not a right or wrong thing. It's just an observation about how is Europe different than the United States. I have certain European friends of mine who are sounding boards that I just love to bounce ideas off of. This is Ollie. He's the only school teacher in a little village where everybody has the same last name, high in the Swiss Alps. It's a humble little town of peasants, and I get to hang out with Ollie and his wife, Maria. Recently I asked him, I said, Ollie, how can you Swiss people so docilely pay such high taxes? And he just said, almost reflexively, well, what's it worth to live in a country where there's no homelessness, no hunger, and where everybody, regardless of how wealthy their parents are, has access to quality health care and education? He's not a crusader. He's a pretty conservative guy in his community, but that's just a European sensibility, you see. And I'm challenged by that. Of course, they're learning from us about the realities of keeping an economy going, and we can learn from them about how to have compassion and justice in our societies. I think Americans are caring, compassionate people. But one thing we're not very good at is dealing honestly with the gap between rich and poor. It's something we would just rather not know about. And I find that when you travel, if you travel honestly, your window is down and those grubby little fingers are coming in, and you can't help but realize half of this planet is trying to live on $2 a day. And the average lot in life for women on this planet is to abandon their children every morning and walk many hours for water and for firewood. That's the reality. I know we have our economic crisis, but I think we need to keep things in perspective. And we do have to realize that even if you're motivated only by greed, if you know what's good for you, you don't want to be filthy rich in a desperately poor world. It's just not a pretty picture. You go down south of the border to poor societies and you see it. Any middle-class neighborhood has to pool its resources to hire an armed guard so that kids can walk to the park safely, because there's so many people without hope and frustrated, desperate people in the streets. Every pharmacy, every bank, every hotel has an armed guard standing in front of it. We're heading that way. We are heading that way if we don't grapple with the gap between rich and poor in our society. And I want to tell you once again, even if you can afford the designer fortifications, that's not the mark of a successful society. There's enough smarts and enough money in our community to sort this out, but we're not doing a very good job up until now. And when you travel, you realize how beautiful your home is, and your community, and your children, and how richly blessed we are, and you're so thankful to get home. But you also realize that these little girls living in a garbage dump are just as deserving and just as precious as our children. Aren't they? I would think so. Now, my daughter's got $5,000 for straight teeth and money left over for whitener. And every girl in her class and every little boy in her class had that much wherewithal to get those straight teeth, braces. And I know that most little girls wish just they had a mom staying at home not looking for water every day. And for the cost of 2 sets of braces here in the United States, you could drill a well and give that thirsty village water, and the moms could stay home. It's not a guilt trip. It's an opportunity. We work hard, we have a winning system, our kids get braces. But if America, who is so concerned about national security, could think a little bit about translating hard power into soft power, if nothing else than for our own national security, just think about it. It takes $1 million to keep one of our soldiers in Afghanistan for 1 year. Now, you got to have enough of them there for whatever mission we're on, okay? I'm not a pacifist. I'm just practical. For that one soldier, $1 million a year, you could drill 100 wells, giving 100 thirsty villages water. And all the moms, instead of walking across the county and pissed off and angry, would walk across the square. And every morning when they pumped that water, they'd think, God bless America. I'm just talking selfishness in here. I'm not talking Christian compassion or anything like that. I'm talking what is good for our national security. And I would challenge us to consider a little bit of soft power. The problem with that, nobody makes big money on that kind of initiative here. So it's a tough sell. But sooner or later, I hope we're going to realize that, because this world is a beautiful place. And if we travel, we can open up to the world. And we can celebrate its diversity rather than be afraid of it. I'll just close with my favorite image as a tour guide. I just love taking people to Turkey because it's our look at a moderate, Western-looking, secular Islamic nation, which is the norm in Islam. It's 1 billion people, not the people that fill our news every night. That's the fringy people. Those are the equivalents of Christians who would blow up an abortion clinic for their religion, you see. There's other Muslims, and that's the norm. And when you travel to a moderate Muslim nation, it's a great opportunity. That's why I'm so committed to my Turkey tour program. As a guide, I wanted to expose my groups to something kind of freaky and scary, like a whirling dervish. Cruise ship entertainment, you know these guys that get in all dizzy. And I found a dervish, and I said, I'll just paraphrase this, but I said, I'm a tour guide, and I've got 25 Americans, and we want to see a dervish whirl. Can we watch you whirl? And he said, I'm not a photo op. But if I can explain to you what I'm doing, I'd welcome you to watch me pray. I said, very good. So we went up onto his rooftop. The sun was setting. Like 5 times a day, he goes up there to pray. And he explained to us, I'm a dervish. That's, for a Christian, you'd call it a monk. But I'm a dervish, and I follow Mevlana, or Rumi. And Mevlana is to the Muslim people, kind of like St. Francis is to you Christians, the prophet of love. Easy for everybody to get their brain around that and endorse that, you see. And 5 times a day, he gets up on his roof and he prays, and he said, I put 1 foot in my community, in the middle, my hometown, my loved ones, my family. The other foot goes around the world, acknowledging and celebrating the diversity on God's great creation. One arm goes up to accept the love of our Maker, and the other arm, like the spout of a tea kettle, goes down and showers God's love on his creation. And as a dervish and a follower of Mevlana, I'm a conduit between God's love and his creation. And 5 times a day I lose myself in a meditative trance, and I think about how I can shower God's love on this planet. I looked at him, I looked at my groups, their eyes wide open, their fear being taken down a little bit, opening up, and I thought, we are creating the very best souvenir ever. Those people are going to go home with a broader perspective. And then I believe when you come home with that broader perspective and you implement that as a citizen of this great nation in how you look at how we're going to design our society and how we're going to deal with the other 96% of humanity, that is making travel a political act, and I think that's a beautiful thing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks. 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 It's so nice to be here. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Rick, that's a wonderful presentation. You've certainly lived up to all of our expectations. And I think you might want to look at how your website peaks after this trip.
Okay.
There'll be a lot of hits from Cleveland. We're going to take about 10 minutes for question and answers, and then our plan is to move Rick back to the lounge so we can have a meet and greet for those of that you want to perhaps take a selfie with him. I can tell you he's great at taking selfies. We have some great questions here. I'm going to give the stack to Rick, but I'm actually going to answer one of the questions. Yes, he really does travel with a backpack, and that's all.
You've seen it, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen it, and I looked for where the hidden bags were or who else was carrying things. It was actually a Rick Steves backpack, and it actually looked loose. I guess it's room for the souvenirs that you bring into it. And I don't know if you know, I only counted 3 shirts and 2 pairs of slacks.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's pretty good. So yes, it's possible to travel for 2 weeks and more, and the packing tips are on his site where they have great videos on how to do it. So
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a lot of credibility among women for packing light. So there's a woman in our office that does a wonderful 1-hour lecture, and it's there on our website with all of our other so you can just watch it for free. And it's Joan, and she's great. And I give my 1-hour talk about how I pack, and that's on the website too. But you want to be mobile. That's the thing. You want to be mobile. And my philosophy is whether you're going for 2 weeks or 2 months, you pack precisely the same thing. There's no rationale for taking more for a longer trip. And I live out of my carry-on-the-airplane-sized suitcase for 4 months out of every year. I'm in Europe 2 months in the spring and 2 months in the summer. I'm in the 30-year rut now. April and May I spend south of the Alps. I go home in June, and then July and August I'm north of the Alps. 2/3 of that time I'm working on my guidebooks, just alone researching or hopping in on tours like I surprised you guys. And then 1/3 of that time I'm producing the TV shows. And it takes 6 days to produce one of our half-hour TV shows. We've produced about 150 of them over the years, and it's so fun to be able to learn all this stuff. When we were on our Scotland tour, I was thinking about what would be good for TV, and I've got a very strong script on Scotland that I'd love to go back to, and I just have to do one thing at a time. But it's just really fun to be over there doing that work. Okay, shall I go through these questions? I'll go through really quickly on these questions here. Oh, and I will remind you afterwards, we're on a time situation and so on, and to be expedient, what I like to do is I'll go out there in the lobby, and I'll be so happy to sign anything you put in front of me, and what I do, instead of having you wait in a long line, everybody gathers around me like you're waiting in line in Italy. You know, it's just a mob scene, and I'm in the middle, all completely around me, and then I will just turn around and sign whatever's in front of me. And it works really good. It's a lot of fun, but you just got to be all the way around, open up what you like, and I'll sign it. And because of the size of this group, I will not actually pose for photographs while you figure out somebody else to use your camera. You can take all the pictures you want of me while I'm doing that, but I'm going to just focus on the autographs, and I'll apologize for that, but because of just time practicalities, take pictures, but if I have to wait for each individual person for a picture, everybody will be here all day and I'll miss our next event. Okay, travel by tours is quite organized and programmed. How can you get real social justice issues from the type of travel? It is a great well, first of all, there's two questions there. Tours versus independent, and typical travel or educational travel. And you know, my passion is independent travel, and I love to teach people how to travel independently. My guidebooks originated as our handbooks for our tours, and now I've rejiggered them so people can do our tours without us. That's the design of the guidebook, and that's my hope. On the other hand, it's very efficient and economic and relaxing to hire somebody else to do the driving, and you know, I was on our tour, is just relaxing, and we knew there was going to be a good dinner waiting for us, and a guide tomorrow, and a nice concert tonight or whatever. So there's good reasons to take a tour, and that's with my passion for independent tour travel. I'm still really enthusiastic about our tours. We take 500 groups a year around Europe. We took 15,000 people around Europe last year. Every year I sign up for one of the tours with a pseudonym, so nobody knows I'm on the tour. I get a special price, but I just sign up through our website. I end up getting letters from myself. It's fun. If you want to know more about that, out there is the we've shipped over our newsletter, which is a 64-page rundown on everything that we do, and my new Holy Land journal, which is 48 pages, full color, a journal from my experience making the TV show on the Holy Land. I hope you can get that. It's out there in the lobby, those two brochures. The other thing is, how do you get social justice and issues from the tour? That's where you need to choose your tour organizer. If you just go on a big mainstream tour, it's really, there's no social justice at all. I mean, it's almost the opposite of that. But you can choose organizations that are designed to have you, it's called reality travel. For 4 times I've gone down to Central America with the Center for Global Education from Augsburg College. You guys have a tour program here, and how can people find out about that? IPMconnect.org. And these are the kind of organizations that make your travels a life-changing experience. IPMconnect.org for Cleveland. And for me, it's a very interesting choice. You know, sometimes you need a vacation, just lay on the beach. Other times you want to come home inspired and better connected with our world. 2 radically different ways to travel. What tips or stories about dealing with the unexpected when far from home? Well, you gotta look for the unexpected. If you've got it so figured out that there's no unexpected, you're your own worst enemy. When an opportunity comes along, unless it's dangerous, I say yes. I just crossed into Palestine from Israel last year when I was scouting for our TV show. I was a little scared. I was exhausted. You know, did you realize you can bicycle from where Jesus was born to where Jesus was crucified in half an hour? From Bethlehem to Jerusalem. But people who live in Bethlehem can't go there, and people who live in Jerusalem can't go there. There's a big wall in the middle. But as a tourist, you can walk right across it, no problem. You don't need a passport or anything. You just walk right across. It's part of Israel from the border point of view. Okay, so you take a taxi to the wall, you walk across the wall, you take another taxi to your hotel in Bethlehem. But the unexpected, I came there and I just thought, I'm beat. I was staying in the Lutheran hotel, the Lutheran guest house run by the Lutheran Church on Nativity Square, where Jesus is believed to have been born. And I was just wanted to go to my room, and then there was like 15 Lutheran pastors there on a field trip, and they invited me to go down to their fellowship in the cave under the hotel. I thought, I don't really need this, but what an opportunity. So I said, yes, I'll join you. And I just dropped my bag, went down there, and here we are, sitting in a cave. And I thought, when there's no room at the inn was really a bunch of caves anyways, and we were just in a cave just like Mary 2,000 years before in the same town. And they had guitars and they were singing, and it was just a beautiful fellowship, and it kicked off my whole Palestine experience in such a beautiful way. But that was an opportunity that came along. And it wasn't planned, it wasn't convenient, but it was one of the highlights of the trip. When you travel, you've got opportunities, and you need to get out of your comfort zone. If you have an opportunity to go to a neighborhood sauna in Finland, to sit there surrounded by naked Finnish people in all that mist, why not? Why not? All right. What social issues are you most passionate about, and what has travel taught you? Well, I'm most passionate about affordable housing, and I'm most passionate about the impact of American foreign policy on people. I am very interested in the biblical concept of the Jubilee year. In the Bible it says every 50 years you should forgive the debt and redivide the land. Now, rich Christians know God must have been kidding. But, it's challenging as a rich Christian to read the Bible through third world eyes, isn't it? It's awkward. You don't want to do that. You want to read the Bible through rich eyes. It makes you much more comfortable. And I just try to be honest in that kind of thing. I'm passionate about challenging Americans to be tuned into justice issues south of our border. But what I'm really excited about is drug policy reform, because I can talk about it, and it needs to be talked about. I don't need to be elected. I can't be fired. I've had I can just blame my European friends, and you got a little dose of it there. So this is my personal mission here, because they are desperate for some paltry celebrity, and I'm the best they can come up with, because nobody can talk about this, But this is a very serious issue. And what I need to do, as I've been doing for 15 years, is to say it's not pro-pot. It's anti-prohibition. It's anti-racism. It's respect for law enforcement. And if you care about civil liberties, it's also respect for adult civil liberties. So those are issues that I wouldn't even thought twice about had I not traveled. Which cities or countries provide safeguards for people with disabilities? It's tough to travel in Europe if you're not a good walker. Whether you're just not a good walker or whether you're in a wheelchair, the most demanding thing physically about European travel is the heat and the crowds of summer. And I would just say, give yourself a break and bundle up and go shoulder season. It's much easier, much easier just to have to wear a sweater and go in April or October than to try to deal with the crowds and the crippling heat of the summer. And if you are thinking about accessibility, so much that charms me about Europe was intentionally inaccessible. That's the whole idea of a hill town. That's the whole idea of a castle. The steps are intentionally uneven. The doors are intentionally small because an invader can't get there, you see. I would say that something I've learned lately is a great opportunity for people who don't walk well is cruising. You move into one hotel, it's designed for people who really don't walk very well, and there's always options waiting on the shore for people who can't walk with a bus. And whatever your degree of physical limit is, that's a very nice idea. And cruising is not, you'd think it's the opposite of my style of travel. But the reality is cruising has its place. It's economic, it's easy, it's very efficient. I like moving into one hotel for 8 days and not having to change. And I like variety. I like one day here, one day there, one day there. It's not 3 days there, it's just 10 hours there. But if you think of a cruise ship, there's 3,000 tourists on a cruise ship. It's like a floating city. Now, 1,000 of them are just not even travelers. They're just looking for a floating Las Vegas. 1,000 of them are lousy travelers that just want to see famous things before they die. And 1,000 of them, by my estimate, are real travelers. They've got their guidebook. As soon as that gangplank hits the dock, they're on their way. And I found that's the exciting thing. And that would be me, and it's probably most of the people in this room. And I wrote a guidebook for that. And I just love the thought of toggling between real travel and then you're on a floating resort. And then real traveling, floating resort. And if that's what you're looking for, cruising is very popular and understandably so. Have you ever had an experience that made you concerned about your safety and made you question whether or not you should travel back to that city, country, or region? In the last year, I've been to Egypt, Palestine, Israel, Turkey, Russia, a lot of places that many Americans wouldn't be comfortable going. My loved ones asked me, I remember, do you think this is safe? I said, as long as I'm not flying through Chicago, I think I'll be okay. Get a grip, America. You live in a dangerous place. There are travel safety warnings other countries are giving about coming here because we lose 30,000 people a year on our roads to handguns, on our streets. We're a dangerous country. I mean, I know it's not so bad to get killed by an American compared to somebody else, but, you're still dead. Statistically, you are perfectly safe going to all those places. Now, the worst thing that's going to happen to you, unless you're looking for trouble, don't go to Syria. You're going to get beheaded, all right? But go to Israel, and when you go to Israel, get both narratives. Go to the Palestine. That's not dangerous. And when you go to a poor country, the worst thing that's going to happen, I think, if you use common sense, is you're going to get ripped off somehow. It's kind of sport. You're rich, they're poor. When you let your guard down, they grab your bag. It's 1-0. You're behind. Get your act together. Okay? It's just, don't be so indignant. We are so disgustingly rich to these people. They're desperate. You leave your camera there, they're going to grab it. Okay? I just never feel at risk when I'm traveling. I honestly don't. We take 5,000 people a year to Europe, 15,000 people to Europe every year. The worst thing that happens is you get ripped off or somebody hurts themselves by falling, but I would not. And in fact, if you're just riddled with fear and you'd like to be traveling, but you think it's dangerous, I want to remind you, your fear is unfounded. It's based on you're watching too much commercial news. Remember, news is just entertainment masquerading as news in our country. It used to be a service networks would provide to our society. Now they got to turn a profit, so they have to sex it up and juice it up, and a lot of us can't handle that. But if you're so motivated by safety, the most dangerous thing we can do as a society is stay home. And if we all stay home, I think someday we'd have grounds to be nervous. But we've got to travel and better engage with the rest of the world. Good. Nice questions. I'd like to read more, but we're out of time.
Thank you. Oh, he's keeping the questions. We might find them.
You'll find them on a pledge drive somewhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, I want to thank Rick. I know that you've appreciated him, and those of you who still want more of Rick Steves, are there tickets available tonight, Joe?
Tickets available 6:30 tonight, the Breen Center at St. Ignatius.
Okay, 6:30 tonight, the Breen Center at St. Ignatius. Tickets are available there. You might hear something similar, but it's always going to be different, and there'll be more time to spend with him. And also, he spoke at the City Club today, so that that's going to be rebroadcast, 10 o'clock Sunday morning. You can tape it. Right. So we'll always have opportunities. So now we're going to move into the next room, and you'll have an opportunity to have things signed. Thanks a lot, Rick.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay.